This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Man, oh man, it's sweet when the NBA playoffs is in full tilt with nothing but surprises galore. And what more can be said, man? It just amps up the excitement for us to continue to do our thing with these autopsy reports. And we're going to continue to keep blazing them bodies, boy, putting them on the slab. And I don't know, and maybe after this conversation with my right-hand man, Shaw, you know, we might have to actually start considering a new methodology of examining these bodies. Might have to incinerate them, spread ashes out in the ocean for some of these teams, man, with the way things have been going with their plight of how things have ended for their season. But that's exactly the reason why we bring up these topics of conversation. So let me go and roll out the red carpet to my man's www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna PNC, my man, Mr. Warren Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. What's good, Mr. Shaw? I know that when the bodies, come in the droves, we're gonna have to probably put in a little bit of overtime with these autopsy reports, man.
Brother, there was like an extinction level event this last week with all these first round teams getting excommunicated from the playoffs and, people lining up to get on this autopsy slab. One team who definitely did not think they'd be here this early, but yet here we are. So we got to body them up, zip them up as we do here on the baseline, my guy.
Absolutely, man. So this week, man, the coveted autopsy reports is in front and center for the show this week, and we're going to continue to keep those things moving along. Three teams really, that one of them especially, that we're actually going to be first up on the slab. We're not even going to waste any time with those guys because it's actually surprising that they actually are at this particular point, but I think it warrants a conversation. So this week on the autopsy report, Sean and I will be focusing our attention on the Milwaukee Bucks. We'll also be talking about the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Atlanta Hawks, both teams exiting out of the first rounds, but very, very different perspectives that have to be given on what has taken place for their season and whether or not the outlook is on a positive note, on a negative note, or something of a level of uncertainty. So we'll dig into all these three teams in this week's edition of the Autopsy Report. As always, we appreciate you and yours for hopping on board with us this week. Be sure to get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA. Get at me at Game Face Lee. The show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline, available on all the major platforms. You know where to find us. Or you can go to www.thebaselinenba.com to check this and all of our previous episodes. And, we'll be rolling out them Autopsy Reports. So please, if you missed out on a team, which I know you don't want to hear be talked about, but you definitely want to find out whether or not things are going to be good or bad moving forward, definitely check out our previous episodes of the Autopsy Reports. As always, when you catch us on YouTube and you see the nice little blue logo down at the bottom of the screen, we rocks with the 19 Media Group family. 19 Media Group be running these content streets. So if you want to catch our show and the litany of great shows that are out there, great content covering the gamut of everything that your listening pleasure adores, be sure to go to www.19mediagroup.com. And as always, you know how we love to roll in with our partnerships, man. We love to make sure that our people is dripped out, ready for the NBA season. So always keep that in mind when you're going to the NBA store. If you're looking for the ultimate destination for NBA gear, look no further than the NBA store, who has a huge selection of authentic and high-quality products, including jerseys, hats, and accessories. The NBA store has everything you need to show off your team pride. With exclusive and limited edition items, you can make your collection truly one of a kind. Also, online presence can allow you to shop from anywhere in the world. So don't miss out on the latest trends and experiences. Visit the NBA store today by clicking on our affiliate link. If you're listening to us on your favorite audio platform, be sure to check out the link in the description of the show. The Baseline is working in affiliation with the NBA store /Fanatics and will be compensated for your patronage by utilizing our link, which is nbastore.vwz as in zebra 6.net/baseline. Once again, nbastore.vwz6.net/baseline. And as always, anything you contribute to, we will always appreciate you and thank you for your support. All right, let's not waste any time. Sean and I throwing on them jackets. You know how we do. You know how we roll. Let's start examining them bodies. Autopsy report here on The Breakdown. Time to break it down. To the bone gristle. Time now for The Breakdown. Callie Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA podcast, and this is our coveted Autopsy report. And the first team that we are very much amplified to put on the slab, surprisingly putting on the slab, will be the Milwaukee Bucks, a team that had the best overall record in the NBA, almost getting to the 60-win threshold, which we thought was almost impossible given the level of competition, not only just in the Eastern Conference, but in the NBA altogether. And yet they were really, I don't want to say the upset darlings, but we almost kind of saw this coming because the thing that we emphasize the most, Shaw, it's all about the matchups. And I think the thing that really surprises me more than anything, I want to get this part of it out of the way here, is when we're talking about the Milwaukee Bucks taking on the Miami Heat, I, for the life of me, can't understand why the media, the sports media, specifically primetime media, never emphasize how much of a rivalry there is between the Bucks and the Heat. I mean, if people have not been paying attention, the Heat and the Bucks have been going at it the last 4 years, where a lot has been on the line. The Miami Heat has been prevented of finding themselves getting deep in the playoffs due to the Milwaukee Bucks. The Milwaukee Bucks and opportunities to probably get a title earlier than a few years ago due to from the COVID situation were knocked out by the Miami Heat. And yet we just kind of like making this seem like the Knicks and the Heat are a better rivalry than what we've been seeing between the Bucks and the Heat. And the Heat are the ones that have proverbially knocked off the number one seeded team in the NBA, and we're not talking about that. That is crazy to me.
Yeah, well, I mean, they've done it twice, right? So, bubble season, I think, Milwaukee was one, and they ended up, the Heat were 4-5, whatever it was. In that second round, they dispatched Milwaukee, I think, in 5 games. The very next year, Milwaukee comes back and was like, yeah, revenge tour like a mug, sweeps Miami in 4 games, obviously. They didn't play last year, but now this year again, they meet up again, 5-game series. So it never goes the way that you think it's going to, especially for the amount of everything that's on the line for these teams when they do meet and kind of clash together. But Miami has come out on top, 2 out of the last 3 meetings in a very, very, and somewhat very surprising fashion. And this year specifically to me is more surprising than even that bubble year. And while we can get into the nuances of, Giannis being hurt and injured, the Heat were also hurt. They didn't have Tyler Hero, and they will not have Tyler Hero for the remainder of the playoffs, and Victor Oladipo. And it's just really, really surprising to see the Bucks go out in this way to a team that they are better talent. They have more talented. They just are more talented. But they didn't have the requisite heart that was needed to get past this Miami Heat team, who definitely smelled blood after games 1, and then even after getting blown in game 2. The way the Bucks let them come back into that stuff in game 4 was really, really indicative of how the series was going to go and end.
Yeah. So I know a lot of people have been fixated on the situation, the post-game interview with Giannis and what he had spoken to. You had brought up the word heart. And I think, Shaw, it's great because I think it ties the two things in together. While I applaud Giannis for his perspective that's given, which I think really should be indicative of how we all should embrace and love and how vital sports should be. It should not be something that is a representation of your failures and successes as an individual in the things that you look to do and to achieve. I think it should empower you more and build a better coalesced community, outside of the noise of the things that we are really dealing with on our day-to-days, right? The question really should be looked at, did the Bucks as a team not meet the expectations? And when you're the number 1 seeded team in your conference and you get knocked out by the 8th seeded team who had to win to play in, right, to get knocked out, I don't think you can give any explanation, any perspective that doesn't look at it as face value. And again, we can talk about other semantics about this stuff regarding that. But to me, you spoke about heart, and I will gladly up the ante on this, Shaw. Heart wasn't just it. It's also your mental approach. And we've seen this time and time again with the Milwaukee Bucks, this up and down trend. They can look like the most dominant team at times, and at times they look like a team that could be got at any given time. And it was front and center in a situation where, yeah, maybe the 3-1 situation put their backs up against the wall made it a lot harder for them than necessary. But in that game 5, they clearly had the advantage for about 46 minutes of the game, and yet they still could not seal the deal, which is indicative of a team that was just not mentally in the right space about the desperation required for them to make sure that they were going to extend the season and not get knocked out by the Miami Heat.
Yeah, I mean, I want to got to give Miami a lot of credit first and foremost. So I definitely want to do that. But I think your point is so well made because in the last two games, the Bucks blew, two double-digit fourth quarter leads. And in Game 5 specifically, with Jimmy Butler out in the fourth, to allow Miami to go on an 11-1 run to start the quarter with Butler out was exactly that. It was inexcusable. The Bucks felt like they had this series in hand kind of at any whim. Like they felt they could turn it on because of how Miami got into the playoffs and because they were the mighty Milwaukee Bucks with all the depth and all the 3-point shooting and all the defense, and all of it failed them. So while a lot of people want to lay this at the feet of Coach Bud, I think it was another podcast saying out there, Coach Bud didn't go out there and miss 12 free throws in Game 5 like Giannis did. Coach Bud didn't have Drew Holiday just getting lit up by Jimmy Butler like play after play after play. He should have probably made some switches defensively there. But
I can throw something into your point because I want to put this in here before we get into another, because I know you'll transition to something else on this. The other thing as well too, because I agree, Giannis missing the 12 free throws, to me that's low hanging fruit. You really want to understand how bad it was for the Milwaukee Bucks? Maybe talk to Drew Holiday, when in both games made critical turnovers as your point guard, critical turnovers that led to the Heat getting open transition baskets and also diminishing the opportunity for the Milwaukee Bucks to finish the deal, right? Chris Middleton, silly fouls towards the final minutes in both of those games, not being able to stay and defend, which you can, and it's going to be another part of the conversation we're going to have, Shaw, about what are we talking about now with Chris Middleton? Can this trifecta be sustainable for the Bucks moving forward if there's expectations about them, going to try to compete for another championship because of what we've been seeing? You can clearly tell Middleton is not still 100%, and we don't know if he will ever be 100%. But I'm just putting the emphasis on the idea that while everyone is fixated on Giannis missing those 12 free throws, that should not have been the only reason why we're talking about the Bucks mishandling this. Like, they have made so many silly mistakes outside of not getting to the free throw line and executing those free throws. They made it much harder than themselves than necessary.
Yeah, and they took bad shots. Drew Holiday specifically. So the turnovers, even the decision making with some of the shots, they got rushed. They got forced into things that they should have had more requisite, poise for a team that has won an NBA championship. So to me, it was more of an indictment on the collective unit than laying it at any one person's feet, whether that's Drew, Giannis, Coach Bud. It was a collective loss, and it's kind of sad to see that a team like this could have turned it on the way they did and battled a lot of injuries throughout the course of the regular season to gain the number one seed regardless, and felt like they were playing the best basketball they possibly could and lose in the first round in devastating fashion. Not even 6 or 7 games, like 2 fourth quarter collapses. So your point about Middleton is very well made. He does have a player option coming off, obviously one of his worst years in recent history. The injuries just never really let him get right, but he's owed $40 million next year. It's the last year of his deal. Does he opt out? I mean, would he really opt out and feel like he can maybe get a longer term deal with Milwaukee or go somewhere else? He's not going to come at $40 million again. Like, I think that those days are gone. So he probably opts in, and they probably make one more run at this. The bigger question, maybe not the bigger, but an equally big question, is Brook Lopez. And he's obviously one of the big linchpins of their defense, and he's owed a pretty significant raise. Yes, he's 35 years old. But he's probably got at least 2-3 more good years in him now. And they have him at the steepest of discounts, paying him $13 million this past year. He's a good guy. I don't know if he's going to be like, shucks, let me Bobby Portis this, and I'll let you get me for, $12 to $15 million. He's going to get a substantial raise and can get that from elsewhere. So the Bucks, despite having to fix a heart problem, so to speak, in terms of how they exit in this playoff, have real issues in terms of how they're going to roster construct, because they have no picks because of the Drew Holiday trade. So it's all second round stuff here for the next couple seasons, in addition to trying to find what you're going to do with Brook Lopez, even Joe Ingles, who they brought in. That was a 1-year situation. Jay Crowder, all of that. He's bitching about not having a role.
He even alluded to the fact that he had no idea. He didn't know
what his role was
on this team.
So that's tough, right? Like, and there's not a lot of great pathways to roster construction. Yes, they are a good team, and maybe they can get some veterans at a discount, but there doesn't seem to be an influx of young talent unless you're willing to move off of Middleton or maybe with some of the other bigger pieces that are on this team.
So let me bring up 2 quick points, especially with the reason why I brought up the Jay Crowder situation. Does it really surprise you that we didn't see more of Crowder playing on Jimmy Butler? Like more minutes expended on Crowder defending Butler after Butler has these explosive games through the course of this series?
I don't know if it. I mean, if Bud didn't have the confidence in Crowder to play, that's not what it was. I think the
No,
bigger,
I'm
not the
not
bigger
questioning
question.
confidence. I'm questioning strategy. In other words, if you're leaving Chris Middleton out there, the reason why the Milwaukee Bucks have been a successful basketball team over the last few years prior to Middleton's injury was Middleton's propensity to step up to be that next guy for Giannis, right? That wound up being the responsibility of Drew Holiday. But if you asked Drew Holiday, he would rather be defending Jimmy Butler than worrying about having to score 35. But if Middleton is not scoring and Middleton is not defending, then what purpose does he serve on that basketball court when the one person that the Miami Heat has is cooking you this whole series? And you don't make an adjustment to say, okay, fine. If I got to rely more on Drew to score the basketball next to Giannis, I got to get somebody to put a body, to put some physicality on Butler. And it surprised me that there wasn't a move by Budenholzer to put Crowder on Butler, at least during portions where the Bucks needed to stymie. You're not going to stop him, but at least put something on him to just at least create some kind of fission in his ability to score at will. I'm just saying, like, I'm just surprised that they stuck with this particular game plan that they had for as long as they did and never tried to make some kind of an adjustment from a defensive perspective to alleviate the concerns that you knew was going to rear its ugly head at the end of games when they were playing the Heat.
I mean, I think if you're Bud, and I agree with you saying in terms of the aspect of like, well, clearly what's happening is not working, but Drew Holiday is an all-world defender and just got cooked. He just got
Yeah, you
absolutely
got
cooked. So
cooked.
at some point,
Absolutely.
you do have to change different looks, but the Heat oftentimes would run pick and roll and get Chris Middleton to switch onto Butler, which also was to Butler's favor and an advantage. So I think the Crowder minutes, he only played 41 minutes in the series. They tried Wes Matthews on him. Wes Matthews, I think, only played in game 1 and then in 4 and 5. So he saw a little bit of time on him as well. I think a lot of people kept saying, well, why not trap? Why not put Giannis on him at times as well, too? Anyway, the Butler strategy was foolhardy. It didn't work. And, now they're home, obviously. I think now we just got to focus on, well, how do they get better? Is there a pathway to that? And I think, financially, as I alluded to, they're strapped. But are they willing to pay and go and deep into the luxury tax? Probably. And they're probably willing to at least go one more year with this. I don't know if Bud's going to get let go or anything like that, too. I think it's a popular and easy narrative to kind of throw out there.
Already done it with Nick Nurse.
Right.
So.
And I mean, and again, we talked about the Raptors, and Nick Nurse is, I'm going to keep utilizing the phrase. I think he's gimmicky, and can he, finagle his way into a situation there? I don't know. I'd rather see him maybe come on as some sort of a top level assistant as opposed to replacing Bud outright. And then if it doesn't work this year, then maybe he's your guy. I'd be surprised if Milwaukee makes any drastic changes. And I think it maybe they're somewhat in the beholden to what Chris Middleton ultimately decides to do. Because if he decides to opt out of that $40 million, well, then, a lot can happen as a result of that potentially. But I suspect that they run this back at least one more year, figure out what they need to do with Lopez, and then we'll be seeing where they land next year. And I think they'll be focused, but we're all going to be waiting, as we were years before they won the NBA championship. It's like, prove it in the playoffs. And that's all Milwaukee has to do right now. Just prove it in the playoffs.
So next year, Shaw, I think is going to be a very interesting year, to your point, with regards to the Milwaukee Bucks. I'll put it to like how you were basically putting it. If Middleton opts in, they're going to have to address the supplemental parts of the surrounding parts for that team to accentuate what I don't know. And we don't know with confidence that they're going to be able to give you that they've already been giving you for the last 3 years, right? Like, I don't want to say that the height of Drew Holiday's powers is what we're seeing, and it's the same for Chris Middleton. But I will say that this team has taken a step back athletically, right? They're not as athletic, but they have savvy players. And maybe that was where they were positioning themselves to get quality shooters here, with them having Grayson Allen, you would have thought that to me is like a DiVincenzo wash, right? So this team to me needs to get better athletically. They need guys that I think can create some discomfort to some of the premier wing players that they're going to be dealing with for the next 3 to 5 years. But the bigger point to this, Shaw, and I think this is going to be the outlying question. Here's where my eulogy comes in. Does loyalty become a liability? Because when you listen to how Giannis speaks, if it's up to him, he's keeping this same group of guys. But if it's about winning a championship, is that the priority that should be dictating what you want to see for this team going into next year? Because you may have to make the hard decision, like teams like the Golden State Warriors had to, and teams like the Los Angeles Lakers have had to. This is about the business of winning a championship, and it may mean one or two of these guys can't be on the roster because they're not going to help you be positioned to win moving forward.
Yeah, well, I think your point is very well made. I don't necessarily know about the athleticism part, but they are also they're a little bit older. They got to be one of the oldest teams.
I think they wanted a lot from Beauchamp, right? Beauchamp. And look how little he was basically used in this series. You know what I'm saying? Now, again, we could be sitting there questioning Budenholzer's decisions on this, but you could also be making a valid point that through the course of the year, was there anything that these guys that were on the roster did to significantly elevate their necessity for what the Bucks needed to do to make this run for a championship? And you can look at it across the other way too with the Golden State Warriors. We talked highly about how they have a very good athletic group of guys that stepped up in some way, shape, or form to help them win the championship last year. How much are they being used in this series right now against the Sacramento Kings, right? So that's what I'm saying. Like, there's going to be a decision made, and a lot of it is going to be predicated on what the head honcho, which we're saying is Giannis, based on how he sees the culture of this team and what's important to him about this team's success. And you heard him say it on the post conference. I'm just saying, to me, I think it's going to permeate on the decision-making process about what this team is going to look like next year and what changes they're going to have to make in order to shore up what they clearly saw got exposed to them in this first round series.
Yeah, I mean, but again, I don't want not to go back and forth. I think they have more of a heart issue than they do a roster issue, and they have some roster decisions that need to be made, and some really intentional scouting needs to happen, I think, for them to maybe get some two-way guys and even some second round picks that can maybe make this roster to maybe address some of the things that you're talking about. But they are, by my estimate, one of the older teams in the league here now, especially with most of your guys, at least 28 and up. Giannis is 28, 29, but Middleton's 30 plus, Brook Lopez 35. I mean, it's going to be tough. But Milwaukee is one of the better teams in the league, definitely on paper, but they have some things they got to figure out intentionally and internally. I think when it comes to their mindset, that's going to have to make them better if they actually want to win another NBA championship.
I'm telling you, man, you talk about maybe we're going to have to step up that plan about getting that incinerator going, man. I don't want to be spreading out any ashes on the Milwaukee Bucks, but I got to tell you, man, with the way that the Eastern Conference is shaped up, Shaw, this window of opportunity for them to go back there again and maybe get that chip, it's obviously going to get a lot harder come next year. So the decision will not come easier. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Coming up, Shaw and I will focus our attention on another team in that very gauntlet-like Central Division, the Cleveland Cavaliers. High expectations for them. They probably should be advancing, but they got ousted. Does that mean that they're not who we thought they were? We'll give you our Denny Green take on this here on The Baseline. We are back. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA podcast, our coveted Autopsy reports. And next on the slab, we're putting the Cleveland Cavaliers. We're putting them on the examiner's table, Shaw. So here's a team that, we said from the outset, the way that this team looks and is constructed, they're going to make some noise. And you can make the argument, Shaw, they really did make some noise. They came out as the 4th-seeded team in the Eastern Conference. The big acquisition of Donovan Mitchell clearly was an upgrade for our expectations for this team. I thought it was lofty to expect them to probably be better than the Boston Celtics or the Milwaukee Bucks. But what we saw from this is a team that is on the come up. Then they run into, I don't want to call it a buzzsaw, but they obviously ran into something playing against the New York Knicks. And now all of a sudden, people are questioning the makeup of this team. All of a sudden, this is a team that won 51 games, Shaw. When was the last time the Cleveland Cavaliers won 51 games?
LeBron.
Okay. So, you know what I'm saying? How many iterations of LeBron, right? Like LeBron 2.0. Like it was, if not for LeBron, this team, this organization doesn't sniff 50-something games. Last year, however, prior to making the move of getting Donovan Mitchell, this team was showing signs of being a promising basketball team. And they made decisions, good decisions, that I think really made this team collectively together look like a team that has a future. So not only being successful this year, but also sustainable success for the next few seasons. But then when you run into a situation like playing against a team like the New York Knicks, where you can make the argument that this roster, Shaw, looks like a better team than what the New York Knicks has at the, out there on a night in, night out basis, you then start to wonder, okay, where are the chinks in the armor? And is this part of the process of their growth and maturation to be an elite team in their respective conference?
Yeah, I mean, it's not all lost, right? The Knicks were just more physical than they were. And Thibs, I think in some ways, did a nice job, really great job coaching this Knicks basketball team. Cleveland ran into the issue of not having enough shooting. Some guys, the moment being a little bit too big for them. I remember speaking on Mad Boostie's podcast with our guy Jabari a couple months ago. And they're like, well, do you think the Cavs are going to make a deep run? And I said, I think the best they can go is the second round. And they said, what do you need? What do they need? I was like, they need shooting. They need shooting especially at that three position, that wing position. That seemed to be extremely true. They shot 32%, I think, in the series. Donovan Mitchell didn't look great, in that. And the Knicks just were more physical and figured out a way to and just beat them up on their boards, especially, which makes no sense when you have Mobley and Jared Allen. Like, for the life of me, I don't understand how Mitchell Robinson dominated them in the way that they did. But to me, Cleveland was probably a year away from being really competitive in the Eastern Conference. I did at least expect the series to go 6 or 7 games, and I actually thought the Cavs had enough talent-wise to get to the second round. I wouldn't have picked them in the second round past that. But the way to lose this way, to this Knicks team that is clearly better than maybe a lot of us even gave them credit for, is somewhat of an indictment on Cleveland, but also more or less saying that they just weren't ready. And the questions about Donovan Mitchell and is he the guy and all that stuff is going to start to come up again, and those are right. But listen, this Cav team is slightly ahead of schedule, but they have some pieces they need to fix. They need some shooting on this roster. Don't know what they're going to do with Karis LeVert and if they're going to try to bring him back. But they have one major monumental piece in house that can ultimately reach the next level for them, and that's Evan Mobley. He still hasn't scratched the surface, and he had a terrible playoff series, terrible. But if he can figure out and become the guy that we all think he can be, there's a lot more upside on this Cavs team than probably meets the eye.
Yeah, so I find it interesting, Shaw, that what you had mentioned earlier before about physicality is the one thing that I think, and maybe we never used that terminology or that phrase more so over the course of what our evaluation was regarding this Cavs team, because I agree with you. I think that this team has a lot of speed, has a lot of athleticism, has a lot of savvy, right? I find them to be a team that you can watch play and have fun watching them play. But at the same time, when you are playing in playoffs, there comes a time when all of that doesn't mean squat. Like, you actually have to body up guys, right? You gotta get in the trenches. And they played scared basketball. They did not play as loosely as I think the regular season afforded them the space and opportunity for them to be able to do these kind of things. And I don't care if it's, you're questioning its level of experimentation, if you want to put it on Bickerstaff, whatever. I'm just saying that the guys collectively, to me, did not understand the magnitude, because remember, last year they were in the play-in, but they didn't get in, right? So this move of getting Donovan Mitchell, while Donovan Mitchell is a guy that you would love to see, and he's great as far as you put him in high level situations, and he's a great scorer. That doesn't mean that like he's the guy that you're going to say, hey, I want you guarding my the opposing team's best dude, right? Because now you're trying to protect him when in essence he has to be that guy. I think a lot of it is just in the things that you do and not of the things that you say or whatever your statistics reflect or show you. You know what I'm saying? So if Donovan is not scoring as many points as Jalen Brunson, if Donovan is not grabbing as many rebounds, as not I say Mitchell Robinson, but let's just say Julius Randle, if he was healthy, right? If he's not, imposing his will on guys in different ways and shapes, the other guys don't know how to take suit and don't know how to do that, and it's just interesting to me on how that played itself out. Because remember, the Knicks were in the playoffs a couple seasons ago, right? And they got the taste of what that was like. Evan Mobley lived Julius Randle's best life this season because he didn't show up for this first round of the playoffs. And while not harping on the playoffs, this was indicative of the type of season that Mobley had. We speak about him in high regard for a certain stint, and then he falls off the face of the earth, like falls off the map. The same thing we did with Jarrett Allen. And then we also can say that about Darius Garland. There was Darius Garland is an all-star, but everyone was sitting here saying, man, this guy, he's exactly, when that choice was made about whether you're keeping him or Sexton, this is why we kept Darius Garland. None of that really came to form the back half of that, the latter half of this, the regular season going into the playoffs. He didn't have a lot of momentum swinging his way. So a lot of this stuff is learning curve, Shaw, but I caution this in saying that they have to have a different mentality going into next year about showing that versatility and evolving with that versatility when they're competing against these different teams that may not shoot the ball as well as they do, but they can physically match up with them with their shots not going. Having guys get to the basket, at will. Like they have to be more free with the way that they play. They have to take that stigma off their back. It's going to be interesting to see whether that growth take place come next year, or if it's going to be another year after that before we actually start seeing that from this Cavaliers team.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's interesting because I think their defense was top rated in the regular season, and we didn't see that same level of aggression. They weren't bad defensively; they were just worse offensively. They didn't match up to the offensive prowess that they had, as a ninth rated team, in the NBA this past season. That to me, I think, is the bigger question, and how can they get better offensively? And some of it will revolve around Mobley. Some other people I've listened and talked about, well, maybe they need to move Allen off and try to figure out a way to put Mobley at the 5 full time. But then there's the conversation. It's like, well, is he physical? Is he ready enough? Can he fill out enough to play the 5 full time? Or is he better suited at the 4? I think the bigger question is what they do with Isaac Okoro. And how do they address again the wing position, and even again Karis LeVert? Those are two guys who I don't know what their future is in Cleveland. And the money that the Cavs are having committed, obviously, because when you have a guy like Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland, and then eventually you're going to have to pay Evan Mobley as well, you're kind of cap strapped yet again. And that's kind of like the crux of your team. So what are the supplemental parts and auxiliary parts that complement those 3 main guys? And I don't know exactly what those pieces look like right now, but Kobe Altman has done a pretty good job, I think, especially in more recent years, of building the team to where it is. But this is a precarious situation, I think, for the Cavs are. Like they're one step away from kind of just taking another step, really. But if they go wrong, like they could just kind of be in the middle, and be a 4 or 5 seed for a very, very long time, I think, with this roster. And again, it really depends on how well and how fast Mobley is going to grow, but they do need to make some tweaks on the edges, as they say, to kind of get some more shooting and some complemental help to Mitchell, Garland, and Mobley.
So just so that I'm clear on what you were talking about before, obviously you're saying that they were just so bad offensively, right? That no matter what they did from a defensive perspective, and it's and I'm not questioning it. I'm just want to make sure that I'm clear where your perspective is that if they just had better offense, then this probably would have told a different story about what the outcome of this first round would have been against the New York Knicks.
Yeah, they averaged 94 points per game against the Knicks in the playoffs.
Right. No. And I'm there with you. I think, to me, Shaw, though, that, and this is what we've often talked about. If you're not a great offensive team, if this is what's been, you've been carrying with through the rest of the year, that only amplifies how much better you have to be defensively, especially going into the playoffs, right? Now, you're playing against a team that, I mean, they were good. They were, listen, they're decent offensively enough, right? To have 4 less wins to getting into that playoff, right? To be the 5th seed. But they did have 2 established star players, right? Not better than Giannis, not better than Brown or Tatum. They had 2 established star players.
Mm-hmm.
One of those star players got off, right? Like, didn't matter who they put on him. Jalen Brunson went off. And what I'm saying is to a player, if you're Donovan Mitchell or Darius Garland or Karis LeVert or whoever, you cannot let that guy beat you. It's like just what we talked about with the Milwaukee Bucks. Like if you're Giannis and you see that Holiday ain't got it tonight, Middleton ain't got it tonight, I understand that you are the man, you're the most dominant, but you can't let that guy get you tonight. You got to step up and take that dude. You got to do it. You have to show those guys. And so that's what I'm saying. If you brought Donovan Mitchell in here, I get why you brought him in here because of what he can give you offensively. But even on that, if you're the number 1 team defensively and the one person that's out there that is cooking you is still cooking you, you're Donovan Mitchell. I'm like, no, I got this dude. I got to get him. It has to happen. If nothing, you're saying something to the rest of these guys that like this is where you got to lock in. You know what I'm saying? You got to minimize their opportunities to score to maximize our opportunities to win. And that's all that I'm saying. Like that to me is what I was more on the emphasis of when I talk about the defensive. It's the mentality or the approach of how you're attacking the situation against the opposing team through the course of the series. And that type
I'll give you a great example. I think, even to what you're talking about, look at Devin Booker in the first round versus Clippers. Devin Booker is like a high volume offensive guy, but took on the challenge to be great defensively in that series. And I think Donovan Mitchell can take that on because it is a little bit of a misnomer when you look at Cleveland saying, yeah, they're the number 1 rated defense. It's primarily based off of Mobley and Jared Allen protecting the rim for the most part. Garland and Donovan Mitchell are not, these defensive stopgaps, if you will. But if they can take on the mentality, especially when it comes to playoff time, like a Devin Booker has, that was what we saw in the first round, that can go a long way in your team's success, especially against a team like, the Knicks and Jalen Brunson, where, that guy's really captaining and mastering their offense and everything they do on the other side of the basketball.
Or even to that point, Shaw, when your backcourt is out rebounding your front court, that's saying something, right? Like if you're Mobley and you're Allen, you should take it personally, right? That the Knicks guards are out rebounding you. You know what I'm saying? Or your own teammates are out rebounding you. And so what I'm saying is it's like sometimes it takes like that star player to do what these guys may not be recognizing if not doing well, they're not doing it at all. You know what I'm saying? In order to spark something to turn things around for them. Because to your point, they're going to have to make moves in this offseason to upgrade their offense. But that doesn't mitigate what you already have as your core reflective defensively. And if that is what got you to this point, they have to maintain that and at the same time improve on what they're lacking. And those things can be done. We've seen that with the Milwaukee Bucks in their transitional year so far, winning 1 championship, but more importantly, sustainable success. Look at the Miami Heat, right? They continually evolve with the role players. Jimmy Butler is still Jimmy Butler, but Jimmy Butler is a different Jimmy Butler when he gets into the playoffs. And that speaks to those guys in the locker room because now they see what type of switch has to be turned on within them. Like they got to find another level other than the level they just gave through the regular season. And to me, that part of it, I think, is going to be key in the decision-making process of the type of guys that Altman should be thinking about if they're not planning to keep the same roster going into next year. Of if the guys you're getting are going to improve, fine. But the guys that you already have to take it to another level if they even want to even make people believe into the level of success that the Cavaliers are capable of having.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's looking at Evan Mobley and Isaac Okoro specifically. Yeah, you have your Osmonds of the world, and do you bring back veteran Danny Green? I mean, those are fringe guys who, again, they're going to get spot minutes, not really make a tremendous impact. But Cleveland, I think, is heading in the right direction, but they do have to be very careful about how they step next, as I alluded to earlier, because it could just be this, for years and years and years, which a lot of teams might be happy and content with, but I obviously that's not the way to go. Where you just kind of like this pretty good team that can't get out of the first or second round. Some of the things are going to have to happen here, and hopefully Altman and company are going to be up to the task this offseason.
Absolutely. You're tuned to the Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Our coveted autopsy reports. 2 teams down, 1 more left to go. We'll be talking about the Atlanta Hawks. But before we do that, are you tired of placing bets alone? Not having anyone to talk to about your predictions, especially after what happened with the Cavs and with the Bucks? Do you want to connect with other sports bettors and share your winning strategies? Then look no further than with the SHARPZ app, the social network for sports bettors. With SHARPZ, you can connect with friends, see what they're betting on, and even interact with their bets. The iOS app connects to all major sportsbooks and daily fantasy platforms like DraftKings, FanDuel, BetMGM, Prize Picks, and Underdog. Here on apps, here on the SHARPZ app, if you download and use the promo code VB286, that's our code, you'll receive access to the community to start showing off your betting chops and an opportunity to compare your bets with us. So what are you waiting for? Download the SHARPZ apps today. Use our promo code VB as in Bravo 286 and start connecting with other sports bettors. Don't forget to share your winning strategies and interact with other bet users. Join the social network for sports bettors and take your betting game to the next level. Stick your neck out to win. Callie Warren Shaw, Baseline, NBA Podcast, Atlanta Hawks, next on the slab, here on the Autopsy Report. We're back. Callie Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA Podcast, and this is our coveted Autopsy Reports. And the next team that we've got up on the slab, it's been a busy day today, examining and exhuming the Milwaukee Bucks and the Cleveland Cavaliers. But next up now, we're going to talk about the Atlanta Hawks. So this is a team that broke even in the regular season. Shaw got ousted in the first round with the Boston Celtics. And I think, I'm not trying to toot my horn in this, but I think I've said this over the last couple of seasons with the Atlanta Hawks. I think people want to use the word overachieve. I don't think it's a question of overachieve, but I do think it's a question of understanding the dynamic of what this team had represented and what they gave you back when Nate McMillan was the head coach and he came in, and what you're basically seeing for the makeup of this basketball team as, again, they get knocked out, the first round. I think the Cinderella season of them getting to the Eastern Conference Finals, while it being somewhat of an admiration, I think it was more about the elevation of Trae Young and the type of basketball player that he is. But now we're at this cautionary tale of, are you getting what you paid for, so to speak? Like, is having Trae Young, and even if whoever you're going to put next to him, in this case, a DeJounte Murray, is that what's best for what you're talking about in order to elevate and win or be considered as championship basketball? We're talking about the Atlanta Hawks.
So let's start with something that has nothing to do with the series, right? I think the Athletic put out a poll of the most underrated player in the NBA. And Trae Young's name came up, in that not underrated, overrated player.
I was about to say, what?
And,
who asked that question?
So, I mean, it's interesting because playoff Trae, if there is such a thing, isn't terrible. He's there's I think there's a version of Trae Young where you're like, yeah, he's built and ready for some of that smoke and some of that movement. But the teams that he's been on, just again, they weren't meant to go on and ultimately lose to better and more well-constructed rosters. This team has just had so much dysfunction, and he is at the very center of a lot of it. Not getting along with certain coaches, and now they're bringing Quinn Snyder, and everybody's on the Quinn Snyder train. He was 13-15, in his tenure at the end of the close of the season. But it's hard, to try to make that change and make those adjustments and institute all of your stuff. Will they be better than next year? I don't know. I don't know, but I think the narrative of Trae Young is really interesting. And then you have, is he meant to be there long term? I wouldn't necessarily be surprised, but it would come at a little bit of an eyebrow raise to me if Trae Young's name is rumored in a lot of stuff this summer. But some people seem to think that that could be the potential case here. He's owed a crap ton of money, over the next 4 years. And I think, with Atlanta making the move to move him on and get Luka and all those, that conversation is come and gone, or whatever the case may be. But I don't know if Trae Young is a franchise guy, but I think it's somewhere in the middle of him being a franchise guy and being overrated. And I don't know. I guess I'll throw the question back to you. Do you think Trae Young is a franchise building piece? Can he be your number one guy, or does he need to be more of a number two?
He's not a franchise building piece because but I would actually caution that in saying, what kind of franchise are you building, Shaw? Because the Atlanta Hawks are somewhat they're not what we consider in the tradition of that. And I think a lot of that is driven the decision-making process that's been made over the last, couple of years. They had a window. They genuinely had a window. And I think now you can actually make the argument that we answered, what you asked me pretty much answered the question in of itself. If Nate McMillan helped get you to an Eastern Conference Finals, I don't understand or see what happened the following season. Yes, some moves were made. I understand that. But you in of itself, Trae Young should essentially be the cornerstone reason that gets everyone else on board in order to make this transition that this team is going to be here and is going to be here to stay. You're going to win that Southeast Division. You're going to be among one of the top 3 teams. That never happened. Never came to fruition. And so obviously now you start losing pieces. Then, in I don't want to act of desperation, but obviously in a commitment to say, we still want you to be our guy, we come and we get you Dejounte Murray. And in that, it obviously leads to certain things happening off the court where there's clearly a clash between McMillan and Young. Now you've got Quinn Snyder. And remember when we had this conversation about Quinn Snyder being hired, Shaw? Everyone is looking at this perspective about Quinn Snyder coming in and innovating this offense probably, or, giving this team obviously a much needed spark, so to speak, or another voice in the locker room. Nah, man, this is evaluation time. You need a credible head coach who's going to be able to properly say, I can win with him or I can win without him. And I think this is what's going to happen. If we're going to talk about Trae Young being a cornerstone player, he's got to learn how to win with Quinn Snyder. And I don't know if that's going to happen. Now, I think Dejounte Murray is on board. And I think Quinn might say, I can win with Dejounte. But I think he's going to be questioning in this offseason based off of what Trae Young does when they come back around for this upcoming season and say, are you all in for this? Or you're not? And again, the Atlanta Hawks are in that space where if it's going to be bad for both, right? It's going to be bad for the Hawks, but I think it's going to be a temporary sting. But for Trae Young, it's even worse because nowhere else, wherever you get traded to, other teams have committed themselves to some of the younger talent that they have. And Young is still young, right? He's a young person, but they're already committed to some of the guys that they already have. Where are you going to make the room to say that Trae Young's going to come in and he's like building block? We're going to really shell out supermax money for if he couldn't get the Atlanta Hawks to sustain a level of success after getting to the Eastern Conference Finals.
So I don't know where he's, if there's, like I said, if there's a real market for him, or if they're really going to try to move him. I think, with them bringing on Dejounte this offseason, they were kind of committing to this backcourt. I'll say if nothing else, I wouldn't expect any major moves in Atlanta, at least for the next year, specifically because Quinn just got there. So you give Snyder a year to implement his stuff, get his guys in, get a system in, improve on this defense, which was 22nd, in terms of defensive rating this past year, but was one of the top rated offensive teams. So there are pieces here that can make it good. I don't even want to talk. It's like there's certain conversations and narratives I don't even want to talk about anymore. And whether or not John Collins is going to be in Atlanta anymore, I don't know. I don't even care.
Well, but my thing, Shaw, is you're saying they're going to probably run this back. And I'm like, you're running backwards with this. Collins and Young do not work.
I think
it's getting worse.
Their standpoint is more of Snyder coming in and being the difference maker to anything else that they've had before. I'd imagine that's how they're seeing it, right? Landry Fields as the general manager there now is like, hey, we got an established coach who's had a lot of success, especially in the Western Conference, with those Utah teams. Maybe this is the guy who can make it work. But I just think the conversation gets, tainted and old because will you or do it or don't? I think with the John Collins conversation, and then there's even the Clint Capella conversation as well too. So I don't have a lot of confidence that they're going to break this team up. They have a lot of guys committed at least past next year, and then I think with Snyder having a full year to do his own system, then they can make probably a better informed evaluation of how they need to go. Obviously, they move away from Herter. Hunter's a guy that they want to invest in as well, and have invested in. But what do they do with Sadiq Bey? Like those things are kind of the misnomers, but I think the core of this team is going to be pretty much what we saw this year.
Right, but it does speak to the question that you asked earlier, Shaw. Is Trae Young a person that you can build around, right? And I'm just saying, look at the remaining pieces even that the Hawks have. Forget the new pieces that they had brought in. Have they incrementally gotten better playing through or with Trae Young as their guard? And I'm not seeing it. Now, collectively, all of the pieces and the players and, whatever's working, it may look like it's right, but I don't think that it is right. You know what I'm saying? And I think there's going to be that hard question is going to lend itself to how much longer do you continue with that? Like if you're Trae Young, you cannot go anywhere else, right? If this is about the money, if this is about the perception, the persona, you know what I'm saying? You really can't go anywhere else. But if you're the Atlanta Hawks, you can't hold with this. It's not going to be in your best interest to do so because nothing has changed in the last 3 years that has warranted the idea that even if you bring somebody else in, if he is the main piece, he's what you're building around, what's being built around is not going to hold up because he's not doing anything to hold it up. That to me, I think is the caveat to this. It's on Young to want to do this. I don't think he wants to do it. And if you're the Hawks, why do you continue to make these moves and transitions and these players that you're thinking will help him? He's not even helping them help him.
That's tough. So I think that's, from if I'm understanding you right, there's a little bit of an indictment on whether or not you think Trae Young even wants to be the guy, or is he just kind of out here, not necessarily stat chasing per se, but he's not necessarily interested in being the leader in the face of a franchise. I don't know. And I'm sure to media members, he would deny that vehemently and say, yes, I am that guy and so forth and so forth. But some of it comes down to your actions and, your play and things of that nature. And there are some people out there, and why I can see why they'd make the argument that maybe some of his numbers are a little bit inflated just because he's just so ball dominant all the time. I really thought some things might have changed with DeJounte being there this year, and it didn't really, at least not in the way that I thought in terms of how ball dominant Trae was. There was still a little bit more your turn, my turn situation going on there as well. But at the end of the day, I think Atlanta is a solid roster that has the opportunity to maybe move off some more pieces. I think they re-signed Bogdanovich in the middle of the year as well too, so he's there for I think another 2 years. And his tenure there has obviously been tenuous because of all the injuries as well. But what do they do with Okongwu? And can they get him out there and can they get him play? Because it doesn't really mix with the mix of Collins and Capella with Okongwu because he's not stretchy and he's obviously undersized at that 4-5 position as well too. So it's not amazing, but it's also not the end of the world. I think I like the addition of Sadiq Bey and then having him under team control here. And then you can decide whether you want to re-up with him. If you wanted to move off of, Hunter, you could potentially do that and move him. Hunter's at a pretty team friendly deal at I think, roughly $20 million a year for the next few seasons. There's a lot of different directions they can go, but the one thing is for sure is they need to figure out a way to shore up their defense and then figure out what they're doing. I think in that front court with the Capella, Collins, and Okongwu situation.
Yeah, look, all of those are great points. Let me ask you this question. Do you think that Landry Fields is going to make significant moves this offseason at all? Or do you think the biggest play that's been made for the Atlanta Hawks, at least now and maybe going into next season, was them getting Murray? And then obviously, they got Bay, but again, he doesn't move the needle for me just yet, because you need a bigger sample size with this team for us to see where, like, how versatile Bay can probably be for this team, and whether or not that is the mentality of what a Quinn Snyder wants to do. I'm just curious from your assessment. Do you think that Fields is going to kind of hold pat, or do you think he's going to be as aggressive, say, like as a James Jones, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, do you think he has that eye for that?
I think I think all options on the table. What I suspect happens is that this team remains largely the same. I think my last point really is it's again, it's the Collins and Capella conversations. Both of those guys have been talked about in trade rumors for literally since they both got there, it seems. And because of the goodwill of that conference finals run, they've just kind of brought everything back and kind of kept things status quo roster wise, with the exception of moving on from Kevin Huerter last season. So to me, they'll kick the tires. We'll hear all of those guys' names mentioned in trade rumors and conversations, but I don't know what the true market value is, and I think there are very hard guys to determine what the value is. I think it's not for lack of effort, but it's just not something that you can just say yes, that makes sense. Defensively, they need to get better, but Capella's supposed to be a rim protector and a good rebounder. So do you trade off of him, and then you're undersized if you're trying to move Okongwu and Collins into that 5 position? And then if you move Collins, like, well, what are the pieces that you get back? Do you put Hunter at the 4 now, and then try to get another kind of 3-and-D type 3 out there? Can that be Sadiq Bey? Do you just need the draft equity? To me, like I said, the Hawks are kind of in a middling situation, but I know Fields is going to do his best. I just don't know that there will be a lot of things that make the roster that much better this upcoming season, because I think they're kind of in the middle. I think in terms of the evaluation of all of their talent, and I think that evaluation and that middling conversation is something that permeates throughout the rest of the league as well too. Like, what is Capello? What is Collins? What would you pay for those guys? I don't even know what package I'd put together, and so then I'd probably just stay away from it altogether if I was another team.
All right. I mean, there's going to be a lot of outlying questions. I think at the end, Shaw, my assessment is I will be comfortable making a prediction that they will be a 500 team, maybe a couple games over 500 come next year.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I think with Snyder, in terms of what his coaching acumen is, and even taking a look at the rest of the Eastern Conference, as currently constructed, as we record today, because obviously free agency and everything that's going to change a lot of the narrative here. But yeah, the Hawks could be same bat time, same bat channel, very, very much in this same conversation next year, right around 500, right around the playing game, and being a plucky first round out. And then they would probably say, all right, we really need to evaluate it from now. But I think when you get a coach like Snyder in, it probably puts some pause on, all right, well, how much are we going to blow up this roster? Because he came here probably thinking like, hey, I can do something with what you currently have, as opposed to like, I need you to change everything to fit my needs.
Well, I don't know about putting more dirt on the Atlanta Hawks than necessary, but this offseason, I think, is going to be a very interesting one at that, because I think it's going to come down to what the players are going to show us come the beginning, a tip-off, what version of the Atlanta Hawks that Quinn Snyder is going to have to work with. Will these guys take this offseason to really focus in, hone in, and find another level for them to step up? Because I've quite frankly look at this roster and I see them again as a at best 500 basketball team. And that to me is just it's complete downtick from what we were thinking was the upside from them 3 years removed from them getting to the Eastern Conference Finals. So it'll be interesting to see what Fields with Snyder and the decision that Young makes in this offseason as well too. Maybe he needs to pass it over to Dejounte Murray, right?
Awesome. Dejounte Murray's getting kicked out of playoff games, so I don't know if he's a leader that you want either.
Well, so. I'm just saying, what do you do? Where do you go? Right? Clint? It's like, go Clint. Okay. Awesome show this week, Shaw, man. Great stuff, man. Hey, man, we were putting in that overtime clock, man. We got so many more teams we got to put on the slab and stuff. So I'm surprised we're able to fit 3 in this week.
Yeah, man, we just try to be succinct and efficient, with our conversation and our words. So let us know what you think about the Bucks, the Cavs, the Hawks, and what the future is for all 3 of these teams. Because a lot of great conversation, 3 teams that obviously made the playoffs and hope to be in the playoff conversation for a very, very long time. And obviously Milwaukee trying to be in the contender conversation. But big summers for them specifically.
Absolutely. Once again, we'd like to thank you and yours for hopping on board with us this week for the Baseline. Callie, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys. You know we do. Catch up with you next time.